If you're traveling over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house this Thanksgiving, or if you're staying home and preparing a meal, you and Granny will need more cash in your wallet for purchasing Thanksgiving food items. According to The Balance, you'll be spending 21% more this Thanksgiving than you did in 2020. And here are some cost increases to note for feeding a gathering of about 10 people. Potatoes, up more than 8%. Turkey will cost you about 8% more this year, and ham a whopping 62.5% more. The cost of cranberries has also skyrocketed, up 28.5%. Pumpkin pie? Well, that's only jumped about 0.5%, so I guess this Thanksgiving, perhaps Americans will purchase less turkey and ham, but eat more pumpkin pie. If you like it, it's not that bad, I guess. Why this huge jump in prices, though, making this one of the most expensive Thanksgivings ever? Well, joining us with more is Stockton University Professor of Finance, Dr. Michael Busler. Dr. Busler, it's always good to talk with you. So why are supply chain shortages happening right now? Are they to blame for this, or is there another reason for this year's costly Thanksgiving meal?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Gary. As you know, it's my pleasure to be here. It's not just caused by supply chain disruptions. There are other reasons why we're getting inflation, not just in the food we buy, but in virtually everything. So how bad is the problem? Based on last month's CPI number, from October 2020 to October 2021, 1 year, prices are up 6.2%. That's the highest inflation, 12-month inflation we've had in more than 30 years. The Biden administration and the Federal Reserve both say this is due to supply chain disruptions, and as soon as the supply chain disruptions are resolved, prices will return to normal. I don't agree with that because there are four other reasons why we're seeing inflation, not just in food, but in virtually everything that we buy. And even after the supply chain problems are resolved, unfortunately, those four problems are still going to be here. So what are they? Number one, the Biden administration would like the country to use less fossil fuels. By restricting the supply at a time when demand is growing, energy prices keep going up. And not only will we pay more for gasoline and oil, but heating oil and natural gas, but also manufacturers will pay more for energy to produce their products. That'll drive prices up too. Even retailers will pay more because most of their goods are brought in by truck, and trucks will be paying higher fuel costs. So number one is energy prices rising. Number two, for whatever reason, a large number of people who were laid off during the pandemic are not returning to work. There's over 3 million people who have simply dropped out of the labor force and are not going back to work. In order to induce those people to come back to work, businesses had to raise wages, mostly on lower income workers. Well, once the lower income workers get an increase in wages, then people who have been there a while say, hey, the new person is making almost as much as I am, so I want to raise. And you end up getting this wage inflation. Once that happens, then labor costs go up for business, so they have to raise their prices 8 or 9%. And then the next year, labor wants even a larger increase, and you get into this wage price spiral, which is also driving up prices. Third reason, the federal government has deficit spent, that is, they spent more money than they took in the last 2 years, almost $6 trillion. On a $22 trillion annual economy, that will lead to pure inflation and an expansionary policy by the Federal Reserve. Those are driving inflation up. Even when the supply chain is resolved, we're still going to have those things present, and I'm very nervous about what future inflation will look like.
Okay, Dr. Busler, the president expects the infrastructure bill that he signed into law Monday will ease inflation. Will new spending ease these alarming price increases? What do you think?
No. If you deficit spend more, you create more demand in the economy, and that will lead to more, not less, inflation. Now, he says this won't add to the deficit and won't add to deficit spending because it'll be fully paid for. But the truth is, it's not fully paid for. They're not going to be able to raise taxes by the amount they want to increase in spending, so it's not fully paid for. And as a result, it will turn out to be inflationary.
Finally, how will the year end for the economy? A better than average Christmas season? What do you expect for 2022?
I expect this Christmas season, assuming there's enough supply, the retail sales to be very strong throughout the rest of the year. Going into next year, I'm very nervous because I'm afraid inflation will remain high both in November and December. I think we'll end the year with about a 7% inflation rate, even higher than we have now. Going into next year, eventually the Federal Reserve is going to have to do something to address the inflation problem. And that something is to reduce that bond buying program and raise interest rates. But the longer they wait to do it, the more drastic the action will become. My biggest fear for next year and going forward is we run into a problem where we have inflation, we have large government budget deficits, we have a huge public debt, which we're going to have to address the first week in December of this year. If business can't get labor, because we have somewhat of a labor shortage, and they can't get capital, because there may be a capital shortage, they can't expand. So what you end up with is an inflationary economy that business can't expand and remain stagnant. That leads to a stagflation problem that we haven't seen since the late 1970s. That's my biggest fear going forward.
Okay, here we go. Maybe a rough ride ahead. Dr. Michael Busler, professor of finance at New Jersey's Stockton University. Thank you, Michael, for sharing your time and insights with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary. It's my pleasure. Look forward to doing it again.